On October 5, 2020, a 23-year-old girl named Marisela was spending time at one of the nightclubs in Dallas. Unfortunately, the night didn't end for her quite as she had planned. Her new acquaintance, an aspiring rapper named Chuck, turned out to be not as cool of a guy as he presented himself. This story has plenty of oddities: disappearances, an international hunt, a possible love triangle, witchcraft, and a whole lot of deception. On October 5, 2020, Marisela Botello-Valadez booked a flight from Dallas, Texas, back to her hometown of Seattle, Washington. The 23-year-old had flown in for a few days to visit an old friend and ex-boyfriend, Raul Ortiz. But when boarding for her plane was announced that day, Marisela was not among the passengers. Her name was called out several times over the airport's loudspeaker, requesting her to proceed to the terminal. However, Marisela never showed up. As the plane finally took off, the seat assigned to Marisela remained empty. In Washington, her parents and younger brother were waiting, and the family was extremely worried. Marisela was a caring and loving older sister, a cheerful, sweet, and hardworking daughter. Her father and mother were proud of her, and when she missed her flight, they were gripped by worry that instantly escalated into grave concerns. Something terrible had happened. Skipping her flight was out of character for Marisela. There had to be compelling reasons for this to occur. The parents immediately started calling their daughter but received no response. They then tracked down the number of the friend she was visiting, but he also couldn't provide any concrete information. The family deemed it necessary to contact the police right away. The girl's friend, Raul, woke up at his home in Dallas and discovered that Marisela had not returned to his apartment the previous evening. He had no idea where she could be. Earlier, the guy had partied hard and drank too much, even losing his house keys. While waiting for his roommates to return and let him inside, Raul simply passed out on the doorstep of his apartment. Marisela didn't want to spend her last night in Dallas sitting in the entryway. She hailed a taxi around midnight and headed back to the city alone. The driver dropped her off near a nightclub where drunken dancing and people partying hard were still going on. She paid the cab driver and continued to enjoy herself. Afterward, surveillance cameras at one of the establishments captured Marisela walking through the parking lot accompanied by a man. The stranger's face couldn't be discerned, but the girl was recognized by the purple dress she was wearing that night. Footage from another camera further away again showed the two walking towards a vehicle, later identified as a black 2014 Audi. Marisela got into the car with the unknown man. The cameras lacked audio recording, so at that point, it was unclear whether she had chosen to get into the car voluntarily or if she had been coerced. No one saw her again. Friends, over 90% of viewers watch videos without subscribing to the channel. Check if you're subscribed. If not, please be so kind as to subscribe to the channel to support me. Several days passed after the girl's disappearance. There were no charges on her debit or credit cards. Marisela didn't appear on social media. Her mobile phone was also unreachable. Calls and messages from worried family members and friends remained unanswered. The family informed the Dallas County Police that Marisela would never get into a car with a stranger near a nightclub. So initially, detectives considered the possibility that they were dealing with an abduction. This was the case until they managed to track the black Audi on parking lot cameras at a store at 1:28 a.m. The car's driver and Marisela Botello-Valadez entered the supermarket together. The footage showed her smiling as she approached the refrigerators and selected a drink to purchase. Based on the store's video recordings, the young woman was not actually being held by force or led anywhere against her will. License plate readers installed throughout the city revealed that the Audi was registered to a 31-year-old Mesquite resident of Dallas County named Charles Chuck Beltran. A comparison of the car owner's driver's license photo with the man in the supermarket video footage confirmed that they were the same person. Charles, or Chuck Beltran, worked as a security guard at a club near where he met Marisela. Chuck had a criminal record. He had spent 2.5 years behind bars for aggravated robbery. He was convicted after beating a man with an unloaded gun and taking his wallet. When investigators checked the geolocation data from Marisela's mobile phone, They discovered that her last known location matched a home address in Mesquite, Dallas County, where the owner of the black Audi was registered. This was the house where Chuck Beltran lived. It turned out that the girl had voluntarily gone to his home, and no one had seen or heard from her since. On the afternoon of October 14th, 10 days after the disappearance of 23-year-old Marisela Botello-Valadez, Dallas County police officers, led by an FBI special agent assigned to assist them in the investigation, knocked on the door of the house where the girl was last seen alive. The house was located about a 20-minute drive from the nightclub, where Marisela had been partying on the night of October 4th. Receiving no response, the police called the landlady, a woman named Lisa Dykes. The owner explained to the law enforcement officers that she hadn't seen Chuck for several weeks. When asked about her relationship with the young tenant, she refused to answer. Lisa simply stated that she had no way to contact Chuck and had no idea where he might be. In fact, Chuck Beltran was not currently a suspect. The police merely wanted to ask him a few questions to obtain information regarding Marisela, since he was essentially the last person to see her alive. Meanwhile, Marisela's family was beside themselves with worry. There had been no news from the girl for about 2 weeks. They were afraid to admit even to themselves that something terrible had happened to her. Every day, they prayed to God that the girl would be found alive and unharmed. Words cannot express the pain and despair experienced by people who have lost loved ones. The complete uncertainty, the faint hope for a favorable outcome, and at the same time, the expectation of the worst possible conclusion. Unable to locate Chuck Beltran, law enforcement obtained a warrant to search the house where he lived. It was Marisela's last known location, and the search had to start there. The dwelling was a sorry sight. It seemed as if the occupants had taken necessary items and moved out in a hurry. Everything left in the house was scattered about. Cabinet doors were left open. Piles of trash littered the floors and countertops. A mattress leaned against the wall in the hallway. In the kitchen, dirty dishes with unfinished pizza mixed with cleaning supplies were left in the sink and on the table. It was unclear how long ago the residents had left the house, but during that time, the ceiling above the main bedroom had collapsed, leaving a heap of insulation right on top of the dresser. The house was in chaos, as if the occupants had simply abandoned everything and left, intending never to return. The police also noticed a curious miniature statue set up as a sort of shrine in one of the rooms. Although it was not given any significance at the time, the figurine was later identified as Santa Muerte, a kind of female Grim Reaper with a scythe. She is the personification of death and is worshipped in Mexican Catholicism, as well as in new forms of paganism. Santa Muerte is considered an unbiased figure who accepts people as they are, regardless of their religious views or status. Something had clearly happened in the house, and to find out what, specialists sprayed a liquid chemical mixture throughout the house, which is used to detect bloodstains. In the guest bathroom, a small area along the doorway and the bathtub itself glowed blue, indicating a positive reaction to the presence of blood. The guest bedroom, where it was later discovered that Chuck Beltran had been staying, attracted the most interest. In this room, a section of the carpet under the window had been noticeably cleaned. Despite obvious attempts to hide the stains, red and brown streaks still showed through under the opening. When the reagent was applied to this area, the result was positive. Analysis of the carpet sample confirmed what the investigative team suspected. It was the blood of Marisela Botello-Valadez. 2 more blood samples were also found on the carpet, 1 male and 1 female. They were presumed to belong to one of the residents. The police spoke with the neighbors and learned a lot of interesting things about what had been going on in that house. 3 people lived there: 31-year-old Chuck Beltran, 56-year-old Lisa Dykes, and a 48-year-old woman named Nina Moranova. Lisa Dykes, the homeowner and landlady, had worked as a legal assistant in litigation for over 30 years. During that time, she had been married 3 times and raised 3 children. According to neighbors, she had unceremoniously kicked out her youngest 20-year-old daughter, Chelsea, allegedly to move Chuck Beltran in. According to Lisa's colleague at the law firm, Lisa stated that her children were old enough to live separately and that she wanted to live in her own home the way she wanted. Apparently, this life included an intimate relationship with the young security guard and aspiring rapper, Chuck. He had his own bedroom, as well as a studio room with soundproofed walls. In reality, the musician's workspace was a closet covered in acoustic foam. That's where he recorded his songs. Lisa bought Chuck a car, the black Audi, registered a small business for him, and financed his music videos. One such video was recorded right on the driveway of the house in Mesquite. Lisa's legal colleague, as well as her hairdresser and longtime friend, told investigators that the nature of Lisa's relationship with Chuck was evident. She financially supported her young lover and made no secret of it. This relationship between them persisted even after Lisa Dykes married her best friend in 2019, the recently widowed 48-year-old Staten Island lawyer Nina Moran. It was a same-sex marriage. According to the same sources, Lisa's married life was also a kind of financial arrangement. Nina Moran had inherited a substantial estate from her late husband. She had also had a successful legal career in New York and earned a good income. After the wedding, Nina retained part of her work and home in Pennsylvania. Most likely, this woman was involved in Lisa and Chuck's arrangement. After moving into the Dykes' house, when it came time for the spouses to choose a common surname, they both rejected their own and instead took Chuck's surname, officially becoming Lisa and Nina Beltran. Cell phone data showed that all three residents were in the house with Marisela on October 5, 2020, the day of her disappearance. Therefore, arrest warrants were issued for all three, Chuck Beltran, Lisa Dykes, and Nina Moran, on suspicion of committing a serious crime. None of them had appeared at home, they were not answering their phones or calls, and the whereabouts of all three remained unknown. Records of Lisa and Nina's phone movements showed that on the night of October 5th, both devices moved from the house in Mesquite to an area south of Dallas and Wilmer. The vicinity where Dykes and Moran were located, according to cell phone tower data, was heavily forested and close to several bodies of water. Dozens of officers from various law enforcement agencies began organized searches for possible remains of Marisela in this area. Throughout November 2020, rescue teams combed the area defined by the cell tower data but found nothing. It was only 5 months later, in March 2021, that a hunter tracking wildcats stumbled upon what appeared to be a human skull in a wooded area. This was near where law enforcement had searched several months earlier. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to Marisela. Due to natural decomposition and the impact of wild animals on the bones, the medical examiner was unable to determine the exact cause of the girl's death. 2 days later, law enforcement in Miami, Florida, tracked down Nina Moran and made an arrest. She and her wife Lisa had been renting a house in the area. Although after Nina was detained, Lisa managed to disappear again. At this point in the investigation, there was no indication that Chuck was anywhere nearby. The women maintained contact with him via text messages while they continued to hide from the police, and the content of these messages spoke for itself. Lisa wrote to Chuck that it seemed the girl had been found, and now warrants were out for all three of them. At the same time, she tried to find a lawyer for Nina, who was being held in a Florida county jail. A few days after Nina's arrest in Miami, 57-year-old Lisa was found near Orlando. Before ending up in Florida, the women had crossed the Mexican border several times in vehicles registered in their names, traveled through a couple of states, and were ready to settle in Miami. After the first call from FBI agents about their relationship with Chuck, the spouses became anxious and took several steps to avoid arrest. They contacted a neighbor, who was also a realtor in Pennsylvania, and put Nina's house up for sale. The proceeds were supposed to help them finance their attempts to evade justice. They then arranged for Chuck's black Audi to be delivered to Pennsylvania, knowing that the car would be sought in connection with Marisela's disappearance. However, all of this did not help them hide in a way that they could not be found. Lisa Dykes was arrested while talking on the phone with her lawyer. The police managed to have her extradited back to Texas. By May 2021, Lisa and Nina were brought back to Dallas. Each posted a $500,000 bail and was released with GPS ankle monitors under house arrest. In addition to tampering with evidence, they were charged with the murder of Marisela Botello-Valadez. Chuck Beltran was also detained. Law enforcement found him in Utah, where he was living with the family of his ex-girlfriend, who was also the mother of one of his children. Lisa Dykes and Nina Moran complied with the terms of their release for several months, from May 2021 to December of the same year. During this time, they planned their escape. On Christmas morning at 7:30 a.m., both GPS ankle monitors were disconnected within about 4 minutes of each other. Taking advantage of the holiday bustle and shortage of resources in the Dallas Pretrial Services Department, the women were able to disappear and remain unnoticed for a full 2 days. It was only on December 27th that pretrial services learned that the monitors had been disconnected. Police sent the fugitives emails and text messages, but received no response. By that time, Lisa and Nina had traveled about 14,000 kilometers and boarded a plane. First, they booked tickets in their own names to Seoul, South Korea, and then on to Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia. Cambodian immigration officials confirmed that the couple had entered the country and had not left its borders. Once again, the FBI was brought in on the investigation. Coordinating their actions with Cambodian authorities, as well as with the country's largest bank, agents were able to identify cash withdrawals made by Lisa and Nina. Security camera footage from one of the ATMs where the accomplices withdrew cash captured the license plate of the car that had delivered the women to their destination. Cambodian police tracked down the taxi and interrogated the driver. The man directed them to an address where 2 foreign women were staying in a house in the coastal town of Sihanoukville. Lisa and Nina Beltran were detained once again. In February 2022, they were extradited back to Texas, but this time they were held in custody without bail. The trial dates for both women were set for 2023. Both refused to plead guilty to the murder of 23-year-old Marisela. At this point, it was becoming clear that these 2 ladies had played a certain role in the crime, but their motive had not been revealed. It also remained a mystery what had actually happened in Chuck Beltran's bedroom that night. By the time the first of the scheduled trials in Lisa Dykes' case began, Chuck Beltran had decided to cooperate with the district attorney's office. He offered to testify and tell the jury what he claimed had happened to Marisela. That night, Chuck returned home not alone, but accompanied by a girl. They had a few drinks and, intoxicated by alcohol and passion, tumbled into bed. When Lisa, in a fit of jealousy, burst into his bedroom at night and found an attractive young girl sleeping on Chuck's shoulder, she grabbed a knife and took her rival's life. Chuck woke up at the moment when Lisa was straddling Marisela and stabbing her. Nina Moran entered the room after the attack had occurred. Realizing that his new acquaintance was no longer alive, Chuck ran out of the house, leaving his 2 girlfriends in the blood-soaked room with Marisela, whom he had brought home just a few hours earlier. Afterward, the body of the young, cheerful girl who had come to Dallas for the weekend was found on a country road south of the city. Lisa Dykes' defense team insisted that she had no motive to take Marisela's life because she hadn't even seen her. According to them, Lisa was not a jealous mommy who flew into a rage when Chuck brought home a new girlfriend. There was supposedly no romantic relationship between Lisa and Chuck, and the woman was already used to new girls appearing in his bed from time to time. Chuck Beltran called himself Chuck the Magnificent, or Chuck 50-50. This meant that he was 50% amazing and 50% crazy. Lisa couldn't care less about the women who appeared in their home. She saw the young man as a talented, aspiring rapper, so she invested money in his development, assuming that sooner or later her investments would pay off. And all these convoluted talks about a love triangle were nothing more than rumors. To make sense of the strange relationships in the house of Chuck, Lisa, and Nina, the court called Katie Dalen as a witness who had long worked as Lisa Dykes' hairdresser. The woman who looked after the youthful lady's hair said that one day she came to her salon very upset, and the reason was that the day before she had come home from work and caught her wife, Nina Moran, in bed with Chuck. Lisa was so enraged that she directly stated that she wanted to grab a knife and destroy them both. But then, after talking to Nina, she cooled down a bit. From the witness's testimony, it was possible to establish a motive: Lisa's incredible obsession with Chuck Beltran. The woman did not want to share him with anyone, not even with Nina, whom she herself had brought into the house. Kathy said that after meeting Chuck at the bar managed by Lisa's son, Lisa decided to radically change her appearance. She started getting tattoos, getting short haircuts, and dyeing her hair in bright shades. Around the same time, the woman lost almost 27 kilograms, had a lower facelift and hip surgery. It was believed that all these changes were made to please Chuck and attract his attention. In a strange and unexpected way, Kathy the hairdresser demonstrated another extreme aspect of Lisa Dykes' personality. Once, while visiting her client's house, she noticed a large statue of the Grim Reaper. The owner, noticing Kathy's interest, joked that she was practicing witchcraft. The next witness was a friend from Pennsylvania, realtor Jamie Scarpa. She described the panic and urgency with which Nina Moran and Lisa wanted to sell the house. Both women were passing through Pennsylvania. They specifically came to prepare the house for sale and sign some documents. When realtor Jamie Scarpa, who had been a guest at Nina's house many times, entered the house, she was struck by the outward changes in the rooms. Usually her house was bright, with the windows always open. Now all the windows and doors were covered with black sheets. The house was pitch dark. In the hallway closet stood a huge life-size statue of the Angel of Death, and in front of it lay a mat, the kind people usually pray on. After selling the house, concerned buyers found another figurine of the Grim Reaper in a smaller size, left by the previous residents on a small side table in the bedroom among candles and glasses for alcohol. The new owners speculated that the house was a place of worship for Santa Muerte. The key prosecution witness was Chuck Beltran. The man offered several versions of his story to law enforcement before settling on one of them. At first, he said that Marisela got into his car but got out before reaching the house. Then he told the police that the girl went with him, but left the house safe and sound. In the next version, Lisa Dykes took Marisela's life, after which Nina entered the room and participated in the attack. The final version he told the jury was that the murder was committed solely by Lisa Dykes. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this video. It's really important. The man woke up to Marisela's screams and saw Lisa straddling her with a knife in her hand. He tried to push the woman off, but ended up knocking both of them off the bed. On the floor, the rivals still didn't let go of each other, and Chuck tried to pull Lisa away by force. When he managed to do so, the girl just lay motionless on the floor. Lisa started yelling that she had forbidden Chuck to bring other women into her house, and now he should also take his things and go to hell. The guy, realizing that a crime had just occurred in his room, suggested calling 911, but Lisa pointed him to the door. Chuck cowardly decided that since Lisa had staged the bloody massacre herself, she should deal with it herself. He got dressed, grabbed his things, and left his patron's house. Chuck was well aware that he was the last person to see Marisela alive, and that all suspicions would fall on him first, so he felt it necessary to hide far away. Cell phone location data fully corroborated Chuck's testimony regarding his movements. He left Lisa's house and went to his ex-girlfriend's apartment. Early the next morning, his car had an oil change, which was also documented. Chuck didn't approach Lisa's house until she called him herself and told him he could return. Entering his bedroom a few days later, the man noticed that the room had been thoroughly cleaned. The women told him they had taken care of everything. When the police, led by an FBI agent, raided the house 10 days after the crime, Nina and Lisa were terrified. They hastily packed their things and went on the run. Chuck followed them, as he didn't think anyone would believe in his innocence. He knew that both of his roommates were lawyers who were acquainted with various attorneys, and he, having a prior criminal record, was the most suitable candidate for the role of the perpetrator. In essence, Chuck Beltran's entire story was aimed at blaming someone else for the crime. The deal with the police implied that all charges against him would be dropped if he testified against Lisa Dykes and told the whole truth about that horrific night. Another interesting point was that 3 different blood samples were found at the crime scene. The first DNA profile matched Marisela Botello-Valadez, and it was assumed that the other 2 profiles belonged to one of the house's residents. But this turned out not to be the case. Whether this blood belonged to those sacrificed to Santa Muerte or someone just accidentally cut themselves remained unknown. Lisa Dykes testified in her own defense at the trial. She told the jury that Chuck Beltran was a violent man and she was afraid of him. This man allegedly had absolutely no control over his aggression. Lisa insisted, despite the sworn testimony of numerous witnesses, that there had never been a romantic relationship between them. For her, Chuck had always remained only an object of business interests, which had now backfired on her. She called him a wolf in sheep's clothing, implying that Chuck could mislead even the jury with his innocent appearance. Lisa also denied worshipping Santa Muerte or participating in witchcraft rituals. She stated that the altar found in the house belonged to Chuck, and the life-size statue in Nina Moran's house in Pennsylvania was just a Halloween decoration and nothing more. In her testimony, Lisa explained that on the weekend when Marisela disappeared, she was still recovering from a failed hip surgery that caused her unbearable pain. At that time, she allegedly could barely walk and drive. She compared this surgery to giving birth, only physically it was twice as painful. However, on October 3rd, 2 days before the crime, Lisa managed to make a 4-hour trip to Arkansas to watch Chuck's performance at a club. Lisa paid for the show, financed the trip, and accommodations in several hotel rooms for Chuck Beltran and his friends. When the group returned to Texas after the performance, the rapper decided to celebrate with his friends at the club instead of staying with Lisa. That evening, he met Marisela Botello-Valadez and brought her home. Nina and Lisa were asleep in their room. Lisa assured the jury that she had never seen or met the deceased girl, but all her words turned out to be lies. She explained her trip with Nina on the night of October 5th to the southeast of Dallas in Wilmer, where Marisela's remains were ultimately found, as a visit to some warehouses where documents were stored, but there was no confirmation of this. But something else was clear. You are unlikely to list a person in your phone contacts as a lover if you had a strictly business relationship, and Lisa swore that there was no other relationship between them. At the same time, as soon as this woman met Chuck, a man half her age, she changed herself almost beyond recognition, just to meet his demands. However, Chuck most likely only needed money from Lisa. He was not attracted to a woman old enough to be his mother. Unfortunately, an innocent girl who carelessly went to visit a man she barely knew had to pay for everything. The jury returned with their verdict in almost record time, spending only an hour and a half on deliberation. They unanimously found the defendant, Lisa Jo Dykes, guilty of the murder of 23-year-old Marisela Botello-Valadez and tampering with evidence for attempting to hide the dead girl's body in the woods. Marisela's younger brother also testified at the trial, telling the jury about his cheerful, responsive, and kind sister, whom he misses every day. He mentioned that Marisela had indeed made the wrong decision when she got into the car with Charles Beltran on the night of her death. But did she deserve to lose her life for it? Lisa Dykes was sentenced to life in prison. Nina Moran and Chuck Beltran pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence. The charges of taking the girl's life brought against both of them were dropped. This is the end of the story. Like the video and leave your thoughts in the comments. This was Jeremy. See you soon.